believe you can do it. I believe that you can give someone a kidney. About 30 million Americans have chronic kidney failure, and about 50,000 people a year die from kidney failure. The average wait for a kidney is 7 years. Every 10 minutes, another name is added to the list of people waiting for a kidney. That's a lot. 40 transplants are done a day, and 6,000 people a year donate. And yet, we still have so many people who still need a kidney. If only one person for every 1,000 donated their kidney, we wouldn't have a problem with the shortage anymore. So this is where you come in. If you're a relatively healthy person, it means you don't have diabetes or high blood pressure or cancer or a number of other ailments, you actually would be a great candidate to donate a kidney. That sounds kind of scary. I mean, you're thinking, a whole piece of me, like one of my organs, just taken out of me for someone else. Well, here's the thing. Kidneys are kind of a special organ. You got 2 of them. And the average human being really only needs 1 of them. And in fact, if you lose one, it actually grows to about the size of itself plus half. That's not too bad, is it? So what do your kidneys do exactly? Well, here's the thing. They filter your blood. They filter out all that toxicity. They help your blood pressure. I'm pretty convinced it also helps control your body temperature. And of course, they make pee. Now, without your kidneys, you're not going to last very long, maybe a few days. Your blood will just grow toxic, you won't be able to use the bathroom, and eventually all your other organs are going to fail. So they're really important. But of course, if you're healthy, you got good genes, you got a good diet and exercise, you can actually go fine without both of them. And that's one great reason that you can donate a kidney to someone. What's it like to have kidney failure? Well, there's 4 stages. By the time you get to stage 4, you have to go on dialysis. Now, you may know somebody who's been on dialysis. That's not fun at all. You basically have to plug up to a machine either 3 times a week at a facility or maybe even every night at home, like my dad did. While you're plugged up for several hours, you got to stay still. You got to stay put. And it's basically doing the work of a kidney. A dialysis machine does the work that a kidney is supposed to do, only not quite as good. So people on dialysis often don't last for a long time. The average lifespan for a person on dialysis is 10 years. And part of that, of course, is because they're much older. But still, that ain't cool. It's also expensive. It's like $90,000 a year to be on dialysis. Now, fortunately, since 1976, Medicare does cover people who have kidney failure if they're on disability. And that really helps cover a lot of the cost of things. And of course, if you have good insurance, it does help. But it's still really cumbersome. Imagine having to go to bed at like 7 p.m. and then wake up at around 7 or 8 the next morning. And the whole time, you're hooked up to a machine. You can't miss once. That really, really hurts your schedule. Of course, the other option is a transplant. You can get a kidney from someone else. Do you have to be related to them? No. It helps, but the main thing is they want your blood types to match, and that's what they're looking for, and they want you to be healthy. Now, one thing people are kind of scared about when they think about losing an organ is the fact that they're losing an organ. I mean, it sounds really bad. The thing is, if it was bad, we just wouldn't do it. So hospitals treat you like a patient if you are an organ donor. You are literally volunteering to be harmed, and because doctors try to go by do not harm, they take it seriously. Not only that, but the transplant centers get evaluated and get their funding based off of their success, not just with the recipient, but with you, the donor. So they're going to make sure, like as close to 100% as possible, that you are going to turn out just great. So when you go to a transplant center, you can probably expect 97 to 99% chance that the transplant will go well. Now, it doesn't mean that the other 3% of people die. It just means that the process didn't go too well, some serious complications occurred, or it just didn't work. Unfortunately, because of the really high standard that is really good, it also means that a lot of transplants just don't happen. They're going to tell people no because they're just not healthy enough. And while that's good for you, the donor, to know that this process makes sure that if you wind up on that table, that you're going to be fine, most likely, the chances are really high, it also means that it slows down the process. And that's one reason why we need more people to give kidneys, because there are plenty of healthy people out there who are able to do this. And I think educating them about it will really give them an understanding of how low the risk is and how great you're going to feel afterwards if you do it. So there's several ways that you can give a kidney. One method is directed, and that's what I got to do from my dad, is basically you choose a person that you know and you choose to give them your kidney. You can also choose a stranger and meet them and ask them if they'd like your kidney and also be a directed donor. But you can also do non-directed. And that's basically when you just give your kidney to the system, so to speak, and say, you choose based off of the algorithm that you have for the big list where children are at the top and et cetera, and they'll handle who gets the kidney. You can do it that way. Now, what if you want to give your kidney to someone and they can't take your kidney? That doesn't mean that you can't give it to them necessarily. Here's what they do. They have this little swap exchange program where you can give a kidney to person X, all right, and then person X's friend who couldn't give them their kidney can give their kidney to your person, all right? And so what that means is that you are giving a kidney, and the person you want to give a kidney to gets one. It's not yours, but effectively it ends up being the same thing. In fact, they can form chains of swaps with people who aren't compatible. It's sort of like the matching section in a test. And one time, I'm pretty sure the record was 30 people. Imagine being the guy who walks into the transplant center and finds out that he is the last link in a chain of 30 people. All right, that's like 300 years worth of extended life or more because of your contribution and the contribution of others. And of course, the other way to give a kidney or any other organ is to die and then have it be harvested. Unfortunately, that's not really the best way for someone to receive a kidney. We also have to wait on people to perish. And even though it's really great that people can live longer, that means that if you want to wait on someone to perish to get their organ, I know it sounds grim, that means that it's going to be a long wait. So we don't want to just wait on people to give us their organs after they're gone. If someone can live healthy without a particular organ or piece of an organ while they're living, then it's a great idea for them to go ahead and give it if they feel they're able to and the doctors decide that they are. So what do I do if I want to give my kidney to someone? Well, if you know someone in particular, you can begin by talking with them about it. It might be important to let them know that you're interested. You don't necessarily have to begin there, but at some point you want to inform them of your intentions. But of course, you can also contact your local transplant center. For example, I live in Southwest Virginia, so the closest one to me is UVA, but there's also Wake Forest in North Carolina. It's best to try to go in the same state. However, many regions actually work in the same network. Once you begin the process, you are immediately assigned a coordinator who basically takes care of scheduling everything for you, letting you know what the next step is, and making sure that you know what's up. Then you go, of course, get a nurse. You get your very own nurse assigned to you. And finally, you are assigned an advocate or a social worker. And their job is to make sure that your rights are being respected, that your requests are being respected, and they would potentially stand between you and the hospital should there be any kind of conflict. Or if you decide to opt out, you decide, I don't want to do this, they're going to make sure that you can do that. And of course, if you do decide at any time in the journey to opt out, the hospitals understand this. They only want completely willing donors. Okay, so what if I lose my kidney and then I get kidney failure? Well, that's a possibility, and it does happen. Within the first 15 years of donating a kidney, about 3 for every 1,000 donors do develop renal failure themselves. However, 2 things to keep in mind. 1, if you develop renal failure after becoming a kidney donor, you are immediately placed on a high priority at the top of the donor list once that failure reaches about 12%. So you are given a high priority. Secondly, the network of people around you that you can contact are going to be sympathetic towards you as well and help you on that journey. And just remember that you may soon find that you are not alone and that people understand what you sacrifice to others and they want to help you in return. Oddly enough, kidney donors actually live longer than the rest of the population. Now, it's not because the donation, the transplant, makes you live longer. That's like a false cause fallacy. But of course, it's because that the people who end up being donors tend to be so healthy anyway, and their health is virtually unaffected by the donation, that they are still going to live a very long life. You might also be wondering about the cost. Well, consider this. Dialysis costs $90,000 a year. And a transplant can cost anywhere around, say, $140,000. But that cost is the cost that has to be paid by the person with kidney failure or their insurance or Medicare. It does not have to be paid for by you. Whenever you become a kidney donor anywhere, the recipient's insurance or Medicare is going to pay for the following 3 things. All of the screenings leading up to the transplant itself for both you and them, and the necessary follow-up appointments after the transplant. So think about that. You don't have to pay for all those costs. Now, of course, you may have to pay for other things. You have to pay for gas. You'll have to pay for meals as you travel to do the screenings. You only have to do about 2 days worth of screening at the hospital, maybe 3. And so that's all you're missing in the few months between, or maybe even up to a year between. I mean, you're taking 2 or 3 days off of work tops to do the screening. And of course, there's some email stuff, some forms to fill out, and phone calls along the way. You'll have to do some blood and urine testing, and that's pretty much it. But all of the medical costs are paid for by the recipient, not yourself. You don't have to worry about that. And you might wonder then, okay, so after surgery, you can't just go right back to work, right? No, you can't. So what's the deal with that? How do I know I'm not going to lose money from taking like a month off of work? Great question. Well, first of all, it is considered a relatively minor surgery compared to, say, spinal surgery or brain surgery. It's actually comparable to a C-section. If you know someone who's had a C-section, or you yourself have had a C-section before, you understand how routine that operation is for doctors. And of course, many women opt to do a C-section voluntarily to help the birth be more convenient to them. And so in terms of what you go through, it's comparable to that. It's not the same thing, of course. I wouldn't say that as a man. But the incision that they use to extract the kidney is similar to that. You do have 3 other holes poked in you. They use a robot to do basically everything. You may be worried about a robot. You think, what, a robot's going to be inside me? Well, first of all, it's a remote-controlled robot. The method is much safer than doing it by hand, and also more cost-effective. And a doctor's hand will literally extract that kidney out of you through that little incision, very similar to a C-section birth. And so knowing that, you might have some idea of what recovery is like. The donor spends about 3 days in the hospital. You go home, and for a week you're pretty sore, but of course you have medication for pain. Within 3 weeks, you may be able to go back to work, depending on what your job is. I tell you, I'm a month out of surgery. I could probably slowly jog a lap around my neighborhood at this point. Within 2 months, you will be completely back to normal with a very tiny scar. Well, what do I do if, say, I make a wage living and I take off a month of work? That's a whole month of pay. The American Transplant Foundation, for example, gives grants to people who need a paycheck, basically, to pay for bills because they will not be making any money in their recovery. And so they do help you compensate for lost wages. And of course, if you have family and friends, or you have a church that you belong to, or people at work, you'll find that if you inform these people about what you're doing, which is sometimes a good thing to do, not only are they going to be inspired themselves, they also may offer to help you out with things. For example, we have 2 children, so we needed someone to help babysit our kids. Well, my in-laws really helped with that, but if they hadn't been around, I could have used some help, and I knew there were people who would have done that. So if you're still not sure about whether or not this kind of thing is worth it, consider this illustration, talking about the C-section again. Imagine if you found out one day that someone you knew who was deathly ill could be given another 20 or 30 years of life. All you had to do was walk into a hospital and get a C-section. That is sort of like a thought experiment to get you thinking. Would you be willing to do that? It's still a lot to think about, and it sounds kind of strange. But again, that's what sacrificial giving is all about. So you're telling me that if I lose one of my 2 kidneys, I'm losing half of my kidney function, and that's going to be okay? Actually, no, you're not losing half. You're losing 20 to 30%. You see, once you lose one, the other one immediately starts to grow. And within a year's time, it's going to be, well, not double, but about 150% its original size. Now, that 20 to 30% still sounds like a lot. But here's the thing. The kidneys do not work like other organs. For example, you can't lose half of or a quarter of your heart. That would be a huge deal. You'd probably die. But the kidneys are filters. And so the work they do would actually vary from person to person based on your genes, your genetic makeup, your diet, what's going into your body, how much you exercise, and a number of other factors. So for many people who are healthy, both kidneys are there, but they're really doing half of the work that they could do because that's all they need. Here's another illustration. Let's say you take your car to the mechanic, and then he tells you, hey buddy, I noticed when you first got this car, it could go 100 miles an hour. Now it can only go 80 miles an hour. All right, well, if you're a NASCAR driver, that's a crisis. But for most everybody else, it may sound like a disappointment, but then you realize, when was I going to go over 80 miles an hour anyway? That's sort of like what it's like to lose 25% kidney function. Your kidneys are filters, and if they don't have a lot to filter, they don't have to do all that work. So you can donate that filter ability to someone who really needs it. My story is this. This time last summer, my dad found out that he had stage 4 renal failure. He didn't even know he had been in the first 3 stages. And within a couple months, he had to go on dialysis. My dad is a talker. He gets excited. He gets fired up. But for the past year, I had to see him go from here to here and spend less time with us and spend more time in hospitals doing tests. It wasn't fun. I didn't like it. I couldn't imagine seeing that go on for the rest of his life. So our whole family went through screening together. So just a little over a year after we found out my dad had kidney failure, I was able to give him my kidney. And here I stand today, healthy as ever. So how did your life change after you donated a kidney? That's a good question too. Almost not at all. After those 2 months or so, you don't really notice anything that has changed. You don't notice the missing kidney. It's only about this big and weighs half a pound. And everything else gets to be the same. They'll tell you, just do everything that you were doing before, but of course, erring on the side of caution, do it a little bit better. Try to eat a little bit better, try to exercise a little bit more. The main thing they do tell you, though, is to drink more water. So that brings me back to you. So I believe that you can give a kidney, because odds are you are one of these people healthy enough to do it. I hope that what I've told you can help you consider it more. Talk to someone who has given a kidney. Ask them about their experience. Talk to someone who needs a kidney. Ask them what it's like to live on dialysis. Being able to donate an organ is an amazing sacrifice. However, I want to let you know that it's also a sacrifice that you're able to do. I don't want to downplay how amazing it is to be able to do that, and I especially look up to people who did it for a stranger. I did it for my dad. I mean, how could I say no? But at the same time, as much of a sacrifice as it is, it's actually very doable. It's a temporary sacrifice more than anything. But I'll tell you one thing it does do. It really helps you right here when you realize what you've done for someone else. Then you're going to want to tell more people about that. That's what I'm trying to do right now, because I want to see more people give their kidneys, and I believe it's a pressing need. We need to share things more. What more powerful way is there than to share a part of yourself, literally? It's scary, but at the same time, it's amazing. The first step, I think, is going to be the toughest, but it actually ends up being easy. Contact your local transplant center and fill out a compatibility form. They'll get you started on the screening. They can find out if you are, first of all, able to give a kidney at all, and they can then find out what kind of person you can give a kidney to biologically. After that, you're already in, and you'll have a team of people who can talk to you about the entire thing and answer all of your questions. I hope I've answered a lot of questions for you. I hope I've gotten you just at least thinking about it, because my goal by the end of this video was to get you thinking about giving a kidney, or of course, any other organ. Well, I leave you all with this quote from Emerson. What lies behind you and what lies in front of you pales in comparison to what lies inside of you.